Hello, I'm Don Mitchell. Welcome back to this series of videos about the 2000% Solution, the book that explains to you how you can accomplish 20 times more for you or your organization with the same or less time, money, and effort. In terms of thinking about this, I'm sure that the concept is really quite fascinating, and you probably enjoyed learning about the stalls and how to overcome them, especially that nagging procrastination stall. It's such a problem. So hopefully you're not procrastinating about learning how to create your first 2000% solution, hopefully the first of many. In this video, I'm going to be discussing chapter 10, Decide What to Measure, which is the second step of the 8-step process that actually creates a 2000% solution after you've gotten rid of all those pesky stalls that have filled you with bad habits that keep you from becoming much more effective. Okay, so in the last discussion, we talked about the importance of measuring. Well, obviously, you can't measure everything, so we have to measure things that will make a substantial difference. This chapter is one of the very best chapters in the 2000% solution, so I'm not going to really address the things that are talked about in there in much more detail than I can here, but I do want to emphasize 2 points that you may not take seriously enough. I take them very seriously simply because I've seen that they are almost always turned into mistakes, and I don't want you to make either of these mistakes. The first mistake is in picking something that's unimportant to create a 2000% solution. Now, why would anyone possibly do that? I mean, who cares if you can pick up the mouse traps around the warehouse 20 times faster or catch the mice with 96% fewer mouse traps? Nobody really cares. It doesn't make a difference. So why do people pick such areas to measure? Well, first of all, this is something that you haven't done before. And as a result, you probably have some fear that, look, this could go wrong, and I'm going to look like a complete fool in my company, and I'm going to really lose a lot of credibility, or I'm going to have a setback in getting my next promotion, or I may not get that bonus that I'd like to get this year, or perhaps everybody won't trust me next time. Okay, so let me address that. So what's the downside of trying to create something that works 20 times better? Well, maybe you only improve it by 20%. Now, would anyone criticize you for only improving something important by 20%? Probably not. They would only do that if you promised to improve things by 20 times. Now, my recommendation is don't make any promises. Just say, look, there's an opportunity here to make some significant improvements in what we're doing in this important area. And I would like to run an experiment on this and see how it goes. And if it's a successful experiment, we'll do more of this. If it's not a successful experiment, we'll learn something, which is not to do this kind of thing. And don't mention 20 times, just say significant improvement. Now, for most people, their idea of a significant improvement is a little teeny tiny improvement. So if you only accomplish 1% of what a 2000% solution can do, you're probably going to look like a big hero to all those who don't realize what you're really shooting for. So it'd be a little bit like people laughed at the Russians when they would try to send man on the moon and the rocket would miss the moon. Um, However, if they had said as their objective is we're trying to have a rocket, achieve a certain speed and go off into space at a high speed, everyone would have said, "Wow, great success, great job, Russians." Okay, so let's think about this. So let's promise almost nothing, maybe perhaps nothing, other than the fact that we're going to learn something from the experience. And I think that will take away a lot of your fear and reluctance to go after what's important. The second thing is you may have no clue how to improve your most important process, even if it has a lot of potential to be improved. How do I know that? Well, if you knew how, you would have already done it, wouldn't you? So as a result, you may have a very natural fear of taking on something where you don't already know the answer. Hey, relax. If you promise very little, nobody's going to expect much, if anything, to happen. As a consequence, be open-minded. You might learn it. Now, what you don't yet know, but you will rapidly learn as you read both the 2000% solution and the 2000% solution workbook and answer all those questions in there, is you're going to learn a lot of important things that you never knew anybody knew, but actually a lot of people know how to do all of the things that you have no idea what to do. So you don't have to become an expert. You just have to go out and be persistent in asking the right questions and paying attention to the answers and taking appropriate actions. And there's plenty of direction in the book and in the workbook to get you there. Trust me on this. Okay, so let's say you're still feeling nervous about this. Well, you could segment this off. Let's say, for instance, that you are doubtful about your new product development process. Well, you don't have to change the new product development process in every part of your company to create a 2000% solution. You could simply say, we're going to create one and we're going to apply it on one process or one product opportunity or a small number, perhaps in just one part of your company. So what's the potential harm of that? Probably nothing. Even if the worst comes to worst, there's really no potential harm to your organization, to you personally, or to anyone else really involved in this. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so by now you're probably a little more open to the idea of going after something important. So what's the final concern? Well, the final concern is how will everybody react? Okay, well, let me make a suggestion. Get a lot of people involved. Let them all play a little bit of a role. And then if it's successful, they can all say, oh, we all participated in this success. And they'll be very eager to do more of it because it makes them look better. Okay, so don't squirrel this off just so that it's your thing. Have this be something that everybody has a chance to be involved in. Now, if they don't want to be involved, don't force them, obviously, but give them plenty of chance if it's just a comment on what you're about to do. The other advantage of that is going to be as you develop a new process, the more observations you get, the more comments you get, the more suggestions you get, the less reason there's going to be for anybody to object with what it is you are proposing or actually doing. So again, you can sort of like taking the flu vaccine in a year when the vaccine actually matches one of the flu varieties going around, so that then you don't get the flu instead. Think of this. Okay, so the second problem I run into is that people, in picking the measurements that they want to take to this now important, process, they pick measurements that already exist. Okay, now that's a good thing to do, and I don't want to discourage you from using any useful existing measurements. However, the chances are extremely high that the measurements that you need aren't being made right now. I'll give you a small example from an experience I had. A company had been involved in a strategy of expanding its own operations very, very aggressively. If it had a spare nickel, it poured it into expanding those operations. It had an alternative, which was to franchise those operations. Somebody else would then pour the nickel into it. Now, when I saw that, I asked a new question, a question that no one had asked before. The question I asked was, which one is more profitable? Well, the financial reports that the management team got showed that almost all of the profits came from the company operations, and a much smaller amount came from the franchising operations. However, the overhead expenses, all of the corporate management, almost all of the corporate facilities, and so forth, were all being unallocated to either business. In other words, they were just put as one big charge against whatever the operating income had been from these two activities. Well, as I looked around and talked to people and saw what they were doing, it seemed obvious to me that 90 or 95% of those expenses were for the operations of the company and not for the franchising. So we put together a team that went out to measure this. And because it was such an important question, the team had to do a lot of work and had to listen to a lot of advice about how to do this properly. So the answer came out probably more precise than it needed to be, but it was still very clear. The company was losing its shirt on its own operations, it was losing a fortune on those operations. So if it kept pouring all of its nickels into those operations, it was headed for the bankruptcy court. Alternatively, it had an astonishing profitability in these franchising operations, and if it chose to pursue those instead, including selling some of the company operations to be franchised, this could be one of the world's most desirable businesses. And obviously, some of those kinds of shifts quickly took place. But notice, without the major expense, and the major expense in today's dollars was several $1,000,000, to take that measurement, they would not have learned that information. So don't be afraid of taking the effort involved to look at developing new information. However, don't just spend money to spend money in doing this. Be sure you have an important question, a question where there's a lot at stake, and there would be a major shift in direction based on the answer, and that there's some evidence to consider that perhaps the current measures were misleading, in some way. So, as another example, it's often the case that in getting information of the customers, that will be limited to, various forms that people send back either on the internet or by postcard or as a result when they buy the product. Well, we all know that hardly anybody responds to those. That's a very small percentage of the people. And these are the people who are very motivated to do it because either things were great or things were absolutely awful. And so you get, two kinds of feedback: the absolute disasters, which you probably would have heard about anyway, and the, oh, everything was perfect. Okay, that doesn't tell you anything at all about what the typical experience is. But if the typical experience isn't very good, you've got to address that. Now, the only way you can find that out is you have to take a sample of all of the people and get them to tell you what it is they experience. And the sample will typically be pretty large. I mean, if you have thousands and thousands of customers, you may well need the better part of 1,000 people to respond, who are a variety of customers and so forth. And that's going to cost you some serious money. And you have to find somebody who knows how to do that kind of research, somebody knows how to analyze it, somebody knows how to explain what it means and so forth. Hey, if you haven't done that before, you have no idea how you're really doing. So you really, have to get involved. Now, you may be in a business where you've only got 6 customers, and you think that their answers are well known to you. Well, I have often in my consulting practice over the years been in situations where I was mostly working for a few dozen companies at any given moment, and of course I was visiting almost all of them on a regular basis, so I really thought I knew exactly what was going on. However, what I found is that what people would talk to me about was different from what they were actually thinking. They liked me, they liked to have a relationship with me, so they weren't going to say anything to hurt that relationship. So it was only if we really made a bad boo-boo why would he hear about it. But there might have been all kinds of things that they were thinking that I needed to address. So here's what I discovered is I needed to get a third party in every once in a while to talk to these folks and find out what's happening. Now, obviously, it cost me some significant funds to do that. But boy, what I learned was really well worth it. So even if you have a small, concentrated number of customers, you think you're in great contact with them, get some help, and find out what else you don't know. So anyway, thanks for paying attention to these 2 important ideas for helping you create a 2,000% solution for your operation. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I look forward to talking to you again as we move on to the 3rd step of the 8-step process. So goodbye for now.